As of now, all of our stupid bullshit is recorded for posterity.
I gotta take the thing that says that we are being recorded off the screen, otherwise I can't see anything that's going on.
Oh, noes.
We're good now.
All right, so I'm going to spend most of my time muted because A, I'm not the star attraction, and B, I don't want to cough over the lovely presentation. Could we please continue the tradition of using the little hand raiser rather than talking over each other, because Zoom can be hell that way? All good? Sweet. All right. This week, we have Isobel Zylstra and Feldmann, who is clearly cooler than Hutton, by which we're not actually throwing shade at Hutton much. We just needed a really catchy title, and that gets people irritated, so they watch our videos. Yay. The goal is to say, hey, there's more out there than just the main two British sources that everybody's been banging their head against the wall for the last 25 years. As a HEMA dinosaur, I can throw that number around. Yay. So, Isabel, could you please introduce yourself and what you do and tell us why it is awesome and people should be interested?
Well, hi, my name is Isabel. I mainly train longsword at Zwaard State in the Netherlands, but I also do saber. And I translated a book together with Russ, and it's out now. It's really cool. This dude that lived in Austria wrote it. He worked at the Theresian Academy in Wiener Neustadt, and he wrote this book in 1878, I think. No, wait. 1887, that's it. I always get confused with years and Dutch and English. He wrote the book on staff and foil and saber and bayonet, and they all work wonderfully together. There's one system with a bunch of things, and then it works together. Instead of having, hey, this is how you do foil, and then a completely different system for saber. So that's neat. I'm gonna share my screen now. Host disabled participant screen sharing. Russ, please fix it. You're muted, by the way.
Test that. Do you have permission? Yes.
I'm not sure I'm sharing the right screen. Do you see the presentation or do you see the other?
We
I
see
see the
fencing at the
presentation.
Theresian Academy, Major Josef Feldmann. I have a book, What the Fuck Lol.
Okay, cool. That was the first page. As you can see, there's can you see my mouse cursor? Or not?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Well, there's staff. It's not really all that long, but it's a big stick. And there's foil and saber and bayonet. Firstly, I want to talk about the staff, baton. And it's fairly straightforward. You have a stick and you work with it, and there's a lot of swings and mostly steps, even circular steps, but it's swings and a thrust. Very simple. Mainly uses it as a exercise to get stronger for young teenagers. People always want to do saber, but this book is structured that it first explains foil, where you have a lot of things like the footwork that you also need in saber. So if you want to do saber, you'll also have to read this or refer back to it a lot, because he just says, yeah, we explained this footwork in foil, go look at it. It's mainly linear, but we can also step to the side a little bit. As you can see here in the left upper corner, if your feet in one line, and there's the end guard position is mainly in quarter, which you can see here in the right up corner, and the thrust. yeah, it's fairly straightforward. You have 4 thrusts as a basis, and then some other fancy things that you can read in the book. It's worth noting that the numbers are not exactly the same as in other systems, so beware of that. Because he doesn't count to 6. Yeah, I think that's the basis for it. And then footwork is fairly simple. Just small step forward when you start with your front foot, and then the back foot follows, and reverse for stepping back. You also have leaning forward, where you don't move your feet, but you lean forward while thrusting, and you have a lunge, and you can of course step back like here on the right, and some extra non-linear footwork and a lunge backwards, which is really funny. Where you go to a lunge position, but you don't move your front foot, but you move your back foot backwards. It's really funny to use to play with the distance. But you can read more of that in the book, because I'm not going to go into full detail. Here's the backwards lunge and the non-linear footwork, which he calls volte. Saber has more cuts than foil has thrusts. You have the same 4 here, the terz, quarte, circle, and second. But he also has prime, and that's his standard position here. I have a stick because the saber doesn't fit, but you hold it here and make cuts from that. The prime cut is vertical, and you also have a low prime cut, which is from below. It's the same plane, but you start low and not high. As you can see here. Yeah, and then you have the other 4 cuts that I mentioned. Any questions so far?
I'm noticing some images that remind me a lot of very earlier French works. I think the lunge where specifically where he's thrusting and he's all the way down where he has his hand on the floor. That reminds me a lot of things I saw in De La Touche from 1670. Yeah, that one on the right.
Yeah. I don't think lunging that deep works, because the picture here is with where someone thrusts a little too high and you go really low to go under their thrust completely. But I don't think the backwards lunge always has to be this low. You should probably stretch before doing anything this low. So
yes,
don't go into it cold. That will end very well.
no, it's just interesting to me that I'm seeing some things that I would be seeing in French material. I'm finding myself in at least somewhat unfamiliar ground.
Yeah, there's definitely some influence from the French. Your presentation was fairly like, okay, yeah, I recognize some of this, and then other systems were explained. I was like, okay, that's not anywhere near this, so that's cool to see. Corey?
You mentioned Vienna Neustadt, and I know some people listening may not know, and I'll just say that so I can cover my own ignorance. I know it was a military academy, right? But is this a big deal? Like, if you're teaching at Vienna Neustadt, is that like really big and like super important, right?
I don't know how prestigious the school was. You have maybe you don't know that.
Extremely. It was the cream of the Austro-Hungarian Empire's military education.
So if you're teaching fencing there, then that is a very large stamp of approval on this system.
Yeah, this is Stanford grad school, or
Okay.
MIT grad school, or pick your equivalent for military education.
I also go ahead.
The Neustadt Military Academy is also still active today. I don't think they teach fencing there anymore, but it's still being used in Austria's kind of military training like stuff. So go ahead, sorry. I'm done.
Corey, you had more questions, or was that it?
It was really just a comment that if you hadn't told me this was a backwards lunge in B, I would have thought that was one of those very like, you know, deep rapier lunges, right? Where we're almost touching the ground.
Yeah, his regular lunge is here, the third picture.
Yeah.
So it's definitely not as deep.
But that kind of makes sense as a backwards lunge. I
Yeah.
guess it really does. I like it.
I did it once. Well, not in sparring because we didn't have enough sabers at the time, but it really works, and it's really interesting to see how the distance changes. If you don't want to get too close, you can do this instead of making another lunge, and you go deeper than you would with just leaning forward. So it's really just a fun way to manage distance without stepping.
My last question was on the saber cuts diagram, because I know this came up in Discord, where people were getting confused, where it was just the vertical cuts and the diagonal cuts, but what about the middle ones? And can you explain, do you throw the middle cuts from one of those guards, basically?
I think that well, they show here that the terrace is along this plane, but you can make him slightly more horizontal or more vertical. So I think it's just kind of anywhere between that, but it's nice to make a divide. Hey, here the third stops being a third and becomes a secondo.
Right.
Georgia?
So yeah, to comment also on fencing from Preem and how important Feldmann's work is, that even a few decades later, when Arlo was writing his book on the high tiers, which he then supplants with Redalian stuff, he comments on how popular fencing from the Guard of Preem actually is. So, to add on to the fact that the Theresian Academy was extremely influential and, well, highbrow, high status, it was also influential in the fencing aspect. My question was, I haven't finished the entire book yet. I know great sacrilege, but do false edge cuts show up in, Josef Feldmann's work?
Yeah, he does say there's false edge cuts, but only advanced students should do them. I think they mostly show up in the manchetta fencing, where you can only hit the forearm in the hand, this little part, which he says to not do with new students, because they will only go for the hands and not for deeper targets, when they should train that first. The stupid newbies, don't let them do the easy thing. Well, the easy targets mainly. But yeah. They do show up, but he doesn't talk about them in that much detail. It's like, yeah, it's like this cut, but you do it with a false edge. So have fun.
All right, pretty cool, pretty cool. Thank you.
Shall I go on? Okay.
Go for it.
Well, Bayonet is fairly simple. He says it's just big foil. It's you do stab, it's stab, but with two hands. You can do everything you can do with foil, you can do with Bayonet, but you don't, because you don't need all of the fancy shit. So he says to do the footwork and some thrust, but not all of them, because you don't need it. It's just stab the other one till they're dead and do the most simple stuff, so you're not in danger as much. The only new thing is the longer lunge, where instead of keeping your left hand in front, you switch it back to behind your right hand, so you can extend farther. But for the rest, it's the same footwork, It's just you move your hand backwards so you have more reach. And then cool stuff. Horsies. He has some advice on, okay, what do you do if you're encountering a dude on a horse with a saber or a lance? And well, you stab them and make sure you're on the right side. So they have this little room to attack you. So he says to be on the other side. So the soldier here is not doing the right thing, what he says. Because if you're on the other side of the horse, the rider has less reach because there's a horse head in the way and his own body in the way to cut you. And if you have to fence saber against bayonet, well, that sucks. But he says to hold your hand here so you can parry and then immediately grab the bayonet or the rifle so they can't stab you anymore. Same goes for the lance. Mostly pictures. It's a very straightforward system, so there's not that much fancy shit to talk about or too wild. It's just, it works. There's influences from France and from Germany and Italy and Hungary. But it's not really outrageous or weird lunges to the side, or you're holding your sword here instead of forward. So yeah, it works. It's all integrated. It's the same footwork for every weapon. Yeah, I don't really know what else you expect me to talk about.
We can start peppering you with questions.
Please.
All right, I've got several, but let me start off with one of them. Actually, let me start off with an observation. Could you switch forward to the bayonet side? So Feldmann's doing something really cool here. Besides the fact that he blocks with the barrel of the weapon, that extension takes the place of the so-called flying thrust with bayonet. So not only is it a long lunge, it's a long lunge in a really supported position. If you see in that right side picture, he's got his forearm basically resting on the side of the butt or available to do so if the leverage is necessary. This isn't just reach. This is hella reach, and he can still do fancy shit on his way out of the lunge. So there's a reason this guy is rare air and teaching at a prestigious academy. This is not something you see very regularly. And having worked through some bayonet manuals, I am not sure how many times I've seen it. It may be just Feldmann, but it's the leverage difference is remarkable.
Yeah, he's really strong on do it safe, don't overdo it, don't be an idiot, and train a lot on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Train well, train safe, basically.
So Georgia has a question, so I'll mute a second and circle back around with my follow-ups.
All right, sounds perfect. My question would be, I mean, to be honest, I am a filthy sabre. I like hitting stuff with curved swords. And my question would be, since this is one whole system spread across multiple weapons, how much of it relates to saber? Obviously, foil is a big part of it, no?
Well, yeah, foil and it's just basically only thrust. And then you get saber and it's also cuts. It's thrust, but also cuts. The body movements and footwork is really similar. So it's just, yeah, here you have everything that's basics. And then you also have cuts and some thrusts in it with some little adaptations because we're slightly curved. But it's not just that foil carries over to saber, it's also to bayonet, and the staff stuff also is very similar to foil and saber basics. And he also says to do the swings you do with staff, to do that with the bayonet to train yourself because it's a fairly heavy thing. So everything is really interwoven, and it's not really that. Oh yeah, there's these wonky, weird techniques that don't fit anywhere in the system, except for this weapon. Well, you hold it differently with the bayonet, but it's not really fancy techniques that don't fit in the system at all.
All
Does
right.
that answer your question,
Well, yeah.
Francois?
There's a thing you said earlier, talking about bayonet, how it's considered basically just a two-handed foil, and I immediately thought, oh, how very French of it, way to think about it. And building off of George's questions, in the French system, our attacks with sabers are built very much with attacks with foil, where same here. I'm going to extend and lunge, right, to go and thrust, and we're doing that within one tempo, basically.
Yeah.
In saber, we kind of do the same sort of cutting mechanics, where we'll do the same thing, where we'll extend the arm, lunge, and cut, and that's kind of where we kind of get the idea that saber is very related to foil, because not just in the ways of thinking systematically, but also in the mechanics, it's very similar. How much of that is also true of Feldmann?
I don't really recall him saying, yeah, it's exactly like a thrust in foil, but the movements in general are very similar because it's still a sword. And whether you articulate a cut with your hand, with your wrist, or keep the hand stable, that's not that much of a difference. Well, if you do it with a moulinet, that's of course a little different, but it's mostly just, hey, we have a body and we have a big pointy stick. They work together very similarly, regardless of if they only thrust or also do cuts, which I think
Alright.
is very sensible.
All right. I was also curious if Feldmann gives us any indication or any if he says anything about his lineage. Who did he learn from, or if there's any sort of details that are related to that.
No, he doesn't really talk about who taught him or whatever. I can look in the introduction thing, but pretty sure he doesn't say anything. No, he just says it's just, yeah, I started working at this newly established academy here and felt it was needed to write a book. So he did. He doesn't really talk about his pastor or anything like that.
Fair enough. That makes sense.
Yeah, we know really little about him. So it's just,
well,
he wrote a book. He worked at this place because he says so. And other sources also says he worked there. Yeah, that's it. That's basically it.
That's interesting because that concords very, very much with the little bit of experience I've had with sources that are also from the Neustadt Military Academy, where it's such a mishmash sometimes of all the surrounding fencing cultures that it kind of gets really hard to pin down like an actual lineage. And I think that because Austria, and especially Austrian fencing cultures, is that the intersection of a lot of systems that we are familiar with. I think we're all finding ourselves to different degrees on familiar ground. That's
Yeah.
I find that interesting.
If you look at the things he describes, there's definitely, okay, this is influence from France, and here you have false edge cuts probably from Hungarian systems, and some Italian influence, and probably some German, but German is a big white country with many things, so it's hard to pin down, but there's definitely, yeah, okay, he was in a place where many things came together and meshed with each other.
Awesome, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes. So I want to piggyback on that for a little bit. I suspect with the Austro-Hungarian stuff and the Austrian stuff that what you're going to see is less of a lineage, and we should probably be thinking less in those terms, but more of a family tree that looks like a family bush. because it really is so insanely cosmopolitan. And it
Yeah.
is very much a commonplace among instructors in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. You see it over and over again in their introductions. I was working in this material and students asked me for a book. So they made a book. And sometimes the book is great and sometimes the book is not so great, but they do it and they do it over and over again. Now, what I wanted to ask you is, why do you think Feldmann introduces the footwork and the big body movements with baton rather than foil, when so many other fencing instructors are saying foil is the basis for everything? He sets everything up from the beginning with, and here's the big stick, go.
Because they're all big sticks to some varying degree. Some are longer, some are shorter. They're all stick. But more seriously, he starts with stick to just, hey, these are good exercises for kids to train their bodies. Well, kids. He is very clear that this is a good exercise to train your body and get stronger and more athletic and get supple. So it's really just, hey, this is good for you. These also train you to be more ready for other things like stabbing people, by just doing movements that are very related to the footwork for foil or saber. So I think it's partially because he instructed there that you get young boys, sadly no girls, nowadays they would probably, to get them ready with something that's not immediately, hey, this can kill, with more, well, a big stick can too, but it's more a game to make the big stick swing. And I think it's good to start with something that's a bit more gamey than the big angry stick made of metal that very much reminds you that it can kill people. So it's probably part of that he taught there and how the school taught there.
So conditioning and getting yourself ready for all the other stuff while simultaneously not having the teenage boys kill each other.
Yes. And who doesn't like to make a big stick swing? Because it also has circular swings where you step to the side one time, so you turn around yourself, basically, with very big swings around your head. Who doesn't like that? That's pretty cool.
I want to see somebody do that in a longsword tournament. That would be awesome.
Montante does that a lot.
Yeah. All right, let me get out of the
Montante
way.
is very cool.
Is. Anybody else with questions?
That's a remarkably different approach than what I'm familiar with, because usually from my perspective, where I'm working with French fencing, we're starting everything off of foil, especially with kids as young as 5 years old. And according to some sources, I think I don't have the book on hand with me right now to say it with confidence, but I think in Saint Martin, he's like starting with young kids and teenagers, and he's starting them on foil specifically because he wants to develop the sort of finesse and like tactile movements that will be required to fence foil properly and then transfer that onto saber. Whereas starting off of using a big stick, that seems to me like a whole different ball game in that sense, that you're working with a lot wider movements, which gets more of the body engaged, and that works great for conditioning. But for me, from my side, is I'm wondering, when do we start foil? Because at that point, doesn't that become necessary?
I looked up the introduction thing where he talks about the weapons and why they teach it that way. He says that the youngest age groups start with staff fencing and move on to foil, and that the older groups, the oldest age groups, he says specifically, have to especially practice saber and shooting, and by extension also bayonet sometimes. But he doesn't give any age. It just says the youngest groups. Probably because this was written for and in the Theresian Academy, so they know what the youngest and oldest groups are. I don't know why he or the school decides, yeah, we're gonna do stick first, but probably something with this is good for your body. You're doing wide movements, engaging everything, and training that way. Because it's not just a saw. They're also training to be a soldier. So being fit and everything in your body works as it should and pretty good. That's relevant. That's good. Makes you not die. So I think that might be another reason.
All right, awesome. Thank you.
Georgia?
Well, one of the things that's also interesting is that why big stick is, well, makes sense completely, because now I've just like looked real quickly and I remembered that Feldmann also has a big deal on hygiene and proper warming up for students, and it might also be related to the fact that since they're, well, students that are about to become important assets for the Austro-Hungarian military, that thrashing them around and, you know, like putting them through the, you know, torture that can be HEMA saber, where you just get rugged with a 1.2 kilo reenactment saber and regret getting up that day, that just simply wasn't an option. So getting them properly warmed up with the proper body mechanics, and then transition to foil and then saber. I think he even says no thrusting in saber because the blade is not suited for that.
Yeah, in sparring, don't thrust. That's me. That's not nice. Probably because these sabers didn't really bend like our good sabers. But yeah, he also says to not let the students train until 1.5, 2 hours after they've eaten, because with a full stomach it's not that nice to train. And he says over and over and over again to not train people to exhaustion and make them stop on time and have breaks so they don't exhaust themselves. So yeah, keep them nice, keep them clean. Also the gear, clean the gear, and make sure everything's fine and doesn't accidentally hurt people or
Laughs in
infect
HEMA.
people. Wash your gear, people. Jesus Christ.
Right. That would be my question. Thank you.
Cool. Francois?
So going off of that, we're not so much dealing with just a method to teach fencing, but a method to essentially train soldiers.
Yes.
All right.
It's not to make them just good with, hey, I can point this thing at you and stab you quicker than you can. It's also about keeping the soldiers well, healthy and fit so they can survive. And even if they have to run, there's like, oh no, I'm so exhausted after 200 meters. That would be inconvenient.
Awesome. Thank you.
Russ?
So having the advantage of a little bit of an inside line, since I was working through Isabel's work, the baton section might be easy to dismiss as just conditioning, but when you look in there, there's some really interesting stuff. Some of that baton looks a lot like Series material, and when you start looking at the footwork in combination with the various swings, this is not trivial stick swinging. There is a lot of, you would have to actually practice this to get good at it. And it would do significant things, not just for building strength, but for broad spectrum athleticism. So I think in contrast to where Francois is coming from the French material, I think it's pretty clear that finesse is not the goal here, but something much more broadly rounded. And it's not merely strength, but very clearly also coordination and agility. If you work this baton section pretty diligently for a month, I could almost guarantee at some point, unless you happen to have a baton ringer to help you, you're going to read that text and go, how the hell do I do that?
Oh my god, yeah. I was translating. I was like, what the fuck is happening? There's like 7 things in a row you have to do, and there's like you're stepping while doing this throw and this swing. And it's really hard to one, string it together, and 2, do it. That's really difficult. It's not just, hey, one big swing and then step again. It's, oh fuck, if you can do it, you look like you look like a Beyblade.
Yeah.
Some of the things you're turning around, you're stepping and then turn. Yeah, it's really cool.
And to specific stepping and jumping and footwork patterns. So you can't just be flying around off balance either. It's
Nope.
really cool stuff. So I think it's not just finesse they're looking for, but a kind of big, broad spectrum athleticism that the baton basically teaches you how to develop. Might be really cool for us in couch potato land.
Yeah, and Saber people don't want to hear this, but you're probably better off if you do the whole book and I mean, at least baton and foil and saber, and not just, I want to do saber, let me do saber. But it's a well-rounded system, and it's everything definitely has a use. It's not just there for, hey, look, I can use this weapon. It's cool. It has a purpose.
You're reminding me with all this, actually, both you, Russ and Iso, that the school of Joinville is not just a school of fencing, but also a school of gymnastics. And there is baton there.
The
You're reminding
Theresian
me,
Academy,
maybe I should go be looking into that now.
Theresian Academy is both fencing and gymnastics. Or well, it was in his time at least. He very clearly says, I was working here at the Theresian Academy as both fencing instructor and gymnastic courses. So yeah, good point. Georgia?
To add to that, this is actually a very popular trend all across Europe, and even earlier than this, if I can just like nudge a little into the direction of the episode we did on cut fencing in Berlin, which was, okay, fencing is one thing, but we're also going to do like gymnastics the rest of the day, and swimming and lifting weights and wrestling. And so, yeah, you can do like nice cuts and parries, but you're also incredibly swole. And this helps you like to, fence for a long time and not get tired and perform techniques well. So, yeah, I think Feldmann's here doing a stellar job of saying, hey, athleticism is also something that can be trained and conditioned and should be part of, in his context, the education of a young soldier, but also in a modern context, that we shouldn't neglect our physical health. Quite the contrary. Yeah, that is just my comment on it, because it reminded me of Berlin cut fencing. But yeah.
One day we'll have HEMA people that are like, we don't just do this one weapon, we're gonna do everything in this book because it's there for a reason. That would be really cool to have a school that just does baton. Well, start with baton and then adds foil and saber. Because it's there for a reason. We're not just jumping to saber immediately. But yeah, one day.
It is interesting coming off of, I think our last video was with Chrisman. He also did a bunch of different weapons, right? So seeing another example of this is a system with different weapons, but with commonalities in footwork and technique, with obvious outliers for interesting, cool things you can do with different weapons. But all in all, it's the same foundation is really interesting, especially because we have so many manuals that aren't. It's just, here is a saber, right? This is how I use it, versus here's a foil. All right, now this is a two-handed foil. Okay, now this is a foil you hit. You can cut people with, but also, right? And so it's very interesting seeing that progression. But I always enjoy how people have laid such foundations, because I would never be able to do something like that. So
Yeah,
it's really,
it's-
really interesting.
It's really interesting to see that some people are very clearly aware that there's this one system that everything works together, and other systems in books are just like, yeah, these are techniques for this weapon, and these are techniques for this weapon, and they don't really work together or have any logic that makes everything fit. But yeah, I think this is better, to have everything make sense, make intertwine, so you know why things work and why you should do them, instead of, yeah, I know this works. If they do this against me, I can do this and it works. But that's how I see fencing and things to learn as a whole, to not see them as short fragments, but as Lego blocks. But wait, you can build these Lego blocks into a whole house. And everything fits. Russ, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, in terms of that, what Corey was talking about being able to put that together, it's also super, super clear that Feldmann has an unusually high understanding of body mechanics. So I'm a specialist. I do that for a living. And I caught Feldmann making a mistake, but it was a very high level, professionals argue with each other pedantically level mistake. It was, the kind of, okay, yes, that's not quite right, but come on, dude, decaf level of mistake. The rest of what he talks about in terms of the body movements and how you organize the body weight and where your base of support is and all of that is absolutely dead on. And it's very clear that he's thinking about the anatomy of the body, how the body moves through space, how this body supports itself under load and altering the balance. It is very, very much a cut above, okay, here's tricks you do with foil, or here's how to win a duel at saber. He's really thinking holistically on a level that you do see in Austro-Hungarian texts because they are into body mechanics, but you don't see it anywhere near as intentional, and you don't see it as often.
No, he also talks about, there's one paragraph where he talks about how you turn something with the hand. I forgot what exactly it was, but he uses words for the two bones in your forearm, that they turn around each other. But this is not modern German. These were old words that aren't used today. I was like, the hell is this? And I spent like half a day searching and asking people online. I found it. And when I was like, oh, these two bones, that makes sense. But so he's also talking about the turning of the bones, and he mentions that for saber, your stance should be a little bit lower because the weapon is heavier. So he's very aware of things that influence each other and how to make sure you don't fall over or overextend. So that's really cool to see that there's attention to details like that. Any more questions?
All right, if we don't have more questions, that brings us to our traditional part of the discussion. So can you hide screen for us, please? Actually, leave it up, it's pretty. Can you give us your elevator speech? Why should you train Feldmann? What makes it cooler than Hutton? What's awesome about it? Hit us.
Well, why should you train Feldmann? Because it's a very thorough system where everything makes sense. There's nothing extravagant or that doesn't fit or makes you exposed. He has attention to detail and make sure you don't injure yourself while training. And it's really safe. And it's just really cool to see how everything fits together.
Cool. Thank you very much. Does anybody have any parting questions for Isabel?
I have one parting comment. Buy
Let's
the
see.
book. It's good.
She worked
Yes.
really hard on it. Yeah, buy the book.
Buy the book.
All right, can you kill the screen share?
I'm sure I can, if I find out how.
Middle.
That's not the right one. Yeah, he did it to a small window thingy.
Okay, hold on. Bang. Okay,
There we go.
I just
yeah.
ended the permissions. That does it.
That works.
All right. So, fencing at the Theresian Academy. Everyone says, buy the book. Very cool. Thank you very much. We've got parting questions. We've got 4 different weapons. We've got an integrated system that makes it very cool, and lots of strange relations among lineages you may already know. So appreciate your time. Thank you.
We'll put the links in the description.
Absolutely. We've got more videos and content coming, so if you liked what you saw and it was useful for you, please stab the like button, /subscribe, and punch the little bell icon so that you're notified immediately when new content comes available. Thanks, and go do the thing.